Hi everyone! We're here to talk about the lore and some of my theories with regards to Chapter 5 of Tribe 9. If you didn't catch the story recap for Tribe 9 Chapter 5, check out that video. Let's get into it. This is exciting. This is the last chapter we can talk about, unfortunately. Let's talk about Taito City. Okay, the city first. Now, I'm gonna be real. I've said this in every video. Don't use me as like a source of knowledge for IRL Tokyo. Okay, I don't know that much about it. I genuinely have no idea why they picked Taito City to have like a marketplace focused governing rules. Some of the other cities have had their governing rules kind of match some of like the sort of tropes of each of the individual cities. I have no idea why Taito City was selected for this. But what I can tell you is that they seem to be focusing more on like traditional Japanese culture with Taito City. Like if you look at the characters in this chapter, you know, Ueno, Asano, Sakura, they all have more like traditional Japanese garb, and like from like the little bits of Taito City we saw in the anime, the architecture also seems to be more like traditional Japanese architecture. There was even planned to be a boss in this game modeled after like the Japanese wind and lightning gods, which the statues of these gods are located in the IRL Taito Ward in Tokyo. So, you know, that's all I can really tell you about Taito City. As for the governing rules themselves, it's yet another satire on like capitalism, right? So it's all about this materialistic desire to have more and more and more. You know, you need to surpass certain thresholds of your possessions, otherwise you're just executed. You know, it's probably meant to more be like symbolic of like a social execution, but a lot of what people do is focus on how much they have and like comparing how much they have to other people, and like basically making fun of people who don't have as much as everybody else. So does that kind of make sense? Like a social execution, you know? And they also bring up this concept, the concept of scamming with the governing rules, right? Not just like pointing out how you can punish scammers, but also pointing out that there's a big risk involved in trying to expose scammers, that if you're unable to have evidence of a scam, like even if you know it, but legally you can't prove it, you're the one who will end up with repercussions. That's a very real issue sometimes. You know, a lot of scammers will circumvent what they do by scamming within the law, you know? So let's talk about the other characters who accompany Yo during Chapter 5, right? So coming along with us, we've got Myuju Jo. She comes with us because of what happened to Gio in Chapter 4, right? So Chapter 5 clearly tackles this issue of people dying and coming back, right? And so that's exactly what happened to Gio in Chapter 4, right? But his current personality isn't really in the kind of state that would work really well in a camaraderie sense. So that's why Mew is the one who accompanies us instead of Gio himself. Mew is the one who's searching for answers. She's finally starting to let her affection for Gio kind of free, and so that's why she's desperate for answers, desperate for any means to bring Gio back. A lot of times in Chapter 4 she's talking about like, she sort of connects things back to the situation with Gio and trying to think like, how can I use this information to help Gio, sort of thing. Now, obviously, on the other end of that, we have Q, right? Q is the one who has experienced that, right? Q died and came back without his memories. So a lot of Chapter 5, so he acknowledges in Chapter 5, like, I know there's something wrong with me. Everyone keeps bringing up Ojiro Otori, and I don't know who that is. So I know I'm probably in the same case as Gio. I died and came back, didn't I? What's interesting is that we don't bring Kazuki along, right? But I feel like it was necessary to not bring Kazuki along, because if we did, Kazuki would do everything possible to stop Q from learning that truth. He would constantly insert himself into conversations and just distract from the truth, because, you know, Kazuki's a very overbearing, very protective boyfriend, and so he doesn't want Q to basically be stressed about these kinds of things. So that's why I feel like Kazuki got left behind for chapter 5, so that Q can come to these truths by himself. And so it was for that reason that we needed to bring Mita along, because there's really only 2 characters in our cast that knew who Ueno and Sakura were, and that's Kazuki and Mita. So if Kazuki's not coming along, Mita has to come along to introduce us. So that's the reason Mita comes along. It's just really interesting, because Mita's like, this is his 3rd chapter that he's appeared. And this is bringing me to my point about character rarity. So I haven't really brought up too many aspects of this game's gacha, but most gacha games put an emphasis on your playable characters, right? And so our 2 characters from chapter 4 who come with us in chapter 5, Hikaru and Hiyori, I believe these to be like the 3-star characters. So most gachas will have characters split into 2 tiers, lower rarity and higher rarity, and the way they call them is like, it's dependent on the game. In this game, they call higher rarity characters 3-star characters, and lower rarity characters 2-star characters. And then, you know, 3-star characters, they're harder to get. They're the face of limited time gacha banners. You know, you have a few characters who are like 3-star characters, but they're permanently available. You know, like Q is an example of that. So what's interesting is that Mita is a 2-star character. You can see in the little portraits back there, gold portraits means 3-star character, and purple portrait means 2-star character. Mita is a 2-star character who has appeared in 3 chapters at this point. But the trend had been for the limited time 3-star characters to appear in 2 chapters. Our first one was Miss Tsuruko Senba, and she was in chapter 1 and 2. Then we had Kazuki, who was in chapter 2 and 3. Then we had Hina, who was chapter 3 and 4. Now Ichinosuke also appeared in chapter 3 and 4, so I would have believed that Ichinosuke was going to be the 3-star character. Now from chapter 4, right, we had Hiyori, Hikaru, and then the 3rd sibling, Yayoi, right? But Yayoi stays behind in Shinjuku City, so that's what leads me to believe that they were going to intend Hikaru and Hiyori to be 3-star characters, and then Yayoi was planned to be the 2-star character. All that being said, Hikaru and Hiyori, they're really there just for more flavor, you know, because they're those 3-star characters, they gotta be there. They're there to give flavor to conversations. Okay, now let's talk some of these Taito Tribe characters. So let's talk Miss Asagao first. I feel like Miss Asagao was going to be the 2-star character for chapter 5. She was introduced in order to be a necessary devil's advocate, right? Because think about it this way. This chapter was trying to push this concept that replicas aren't real people, right? But we're contending with Q, who died and came back. We're contending with Mew, whose boyfriend died and came back. And we're contending with Ueno, who died and came back. So the party is kind of on the side of treating these body doubles as real people, as actual replacements for these characters. So it wouldn't have made any sense if any of our party initially thought of these people as fake. That's why we needed an Asagao, someone who is not affiliated with the party at all, to come in and basically be the one to say, these people are fakes. Do you know what I mean? Like, we needed a third party in order to play that role. And that's what she was there for. So now let's get into the boys. And I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed. This is one area, oops. This is honestly one area where I feel like the anime works against this game. Okay, because having the anime means that two things can happen. People who love the series are gonna go all in on the anime, and they're gonna watch it and they're gonna know all about the anime, right? So they're gonna know about Sakura and Ueno, right? And then you're gonna have the people who are just kind of playing this game casually, you know? They don't want to like consume external media just to understand what's going on in this game, right? So you're gonna alienate the people who didn't watch the anime because they're not going to know anything about Sakura and Ueno. Like, the same thing kind of happened with some of the other chapters that were related to the anime, but like chapter 2 didn't have much with the plot line. Chapter 3 was, that was a lot, but they did explain a lot of like the overarching plot line. But my real point is that both sides in this case are kind of losers, because I feel like they portrayed Ueno and Sakura a little bit too differently from how they were portrayed in the anime compared to the game. Because in the anime, both of them are portrayed as like emergency saviors. You know, Sakura is this emergency muscle head. You know, in the anime, Sakura joined the Chiyoda battle against Ojiro Otori. By the way, if you're not sure what that is, go look at my anime videos, okay? Part 1 and Part 2. And it was really Sakura joining the Chiyoda battle that was kind of like a tipping force that, you know, actually had us have a shot at defeating Ojiro Otori. So that's what I mean by like emergency muscle. The Taito Tribe typically were like independent third parties. You know, they didn't like to align with any one specific faction, but they were there when they would go there when anyone was going to be too rambunctious. You know, on Ueno's side, he was the emergency brain. You know, he would be the one to sit in the back, not say too much, but he always had that smile on his face. He was kind of the trope of like a schemer character, but he was a positive schemer. Okay, his schemes were meant to bring comfort to other people. You know, he would come up with these plans and come up with these ideas that would help others succeed. So do you know what I mean? So like, does it make sense what I mean by like emergency saviors? But then we approach the game, and our emergency muscle, Sakura, was defeated by Akuta. Okay, the pair, Ueno and Sakura, were defeated by Akuta. Ueno lost his life to Akuta. But a chapter before, we took on Akuta in his strongest form, and we killed Akuta. So it's almost like Ueno and Sakura in the game, they're weaker than us. But in the anime, they're like god tier, you know? So there's this really visible imbalance in the way that they're portrayed between the anime and the game. So if you're someone who has the anime in your back pocket, like me, you see like what's going on with them in chapter 5, and you wonder to yourself, like, is this the same two people from the anime? But if you don't have the anime in your pocket, then like when they reveal that Ueno is dead 30 minutes into the chapter, you're just kind of like, okay, I don't really know who Ueno is. Why should I care about the fact that he's dead? Do you know what I mean? You're kind of missing that emotional connection to these characters. That's why I say, like, it doesn't matter whether you know the anime or not. Both sides are kind of losing, because I don't know, it's something was just lost between the anime and the game with trying to portray these two. Like, there's still a lot of similarities, and like their personalities are generally the same. Sakura tends to be like a little bit lazy, and when push comes to shove, he likes to solve things through muscle, but like then he just sits down and accepts that he's going to die. Ueno, he's still like, someone who goes about things solo, you know, coming up with these plans and acting on them solo, and at the end of the day, he comes out in a pinch to rescue everyone. You know, he's the one who brought back that XP ball to Sakura. He's the one who was basically able to track down Asagao, you know what I mean? He's the one who had the idea that we can point out Akuta is a scammer and use the governing rules against him. You know what I mean? So they still have a lot going for them. It's just that this whole concept that the two of them lost to Akuta when we defeated Akuta is just, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me. Let's talk about him. According to the auto-translate, his name is Mustard Dust. I think he put the mustard in his hair. But his name is Akuta Jin. Number 2. Now I can tell you right now, I have no idea why he's number 2. The number, like the actual number that the other characters were assigned, sometimes made sense. You know, as to like their identity and stuff. I have no idea why Akuta was assigned number 2. Like, the only thing I can think of is, like, he appeared in 2 chapters. You know, chapter 4 and chapter 5, number 2 chapters. That's the only thing I can think of, like, as to why they would assign him that number specifically. But, Akuta Jin, if you recall from, like, some of his background from chapter 4, he's originally from Taito City. And he was the sort of head of an assassination organization that would like train up, they would train orphans to become assassins, you know, that kind of whole shebang. And we learn a little bit more about his mental state in chapter 5. Ueno is the kind of unhinged psychological monster who enjoys the act of murder. Okay, to him, killing someone is poetic. You know, he likes the spontaneity of murder in that it brings meaning to a person's death. Like, it's nonsensical, but it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to make sense of, you're not really supposed to make sense of murder. If you are, I'd be concerned. So all throughout chapter 4 and 5, he is just constantly painted as this horrendous, unredeemable villain. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, because he was selling humans, right? He was selling body doubles, replicas. I wouldn't be surprised if Akuta was the one going around, if he went around murdering people so that he could sell their replica to their loved ones, creating the demand for his supply. Like, that is the level of ferocity and just psychological instability in the way that he thinks. But all of this heinous, all of it was to prop up Yo. Okay? Akuta was meant to be this big, humongous, bad villain, all to make Yo seem like an even bigger villain. Because at the end of the story, Akuta tries to reach out to Yo and say, Yo, you and I, we can join together and kill Zero. We can bring back true death to this world. I hate this world because Akuta hates this concept of revival because of that poetic desire for murder. But if he kills someone and they just come back, to him, there's nothing poetic about that. And so that's why he wants to stop this act of revival and bring back true death to the world. And he thought he could bring Yo to his side. But at the end of the day, he couldn't. And Yo crashes out and he kills Akuta. Yo, up until this point, Yo has expressed no desire to kill any of the numbers. Okay, he didn't want any of the other chapters to end in the death of the numbers. This was the first time that Yo basically directly murders one of the numbers by using the governing rules. He enforces the sort of scam system to kill Akuta. So Akuta was built up as this super powerful evil villain that Yo kills without batting an eye. Yo kills him without batting an eye. And that's just meant to show just how sickeningly terrifying the real Yo actually is. Sickening. Let's close out with the gag, okay? Because after every chapter sort of brings it back to the overarching theme and question of this game. You know, up until this point, we've been slowly developing that question. And so the final question is, what makes you, you? You know, a lot of the chapters before this have been pushing the concept of the body, right? Q appears. He doesn't have his memories, but it looks like Q. Gio doesn't have his memories, but it looks like Gio. Yo didn't have his memories, but he looks like Yo. And so everyone identifies them based on how they appear, based on their body. Chapter 4 throws a wrinkle in things, right? With Miss Ururido Furuike, get her on the screen. Where did she go? Miss Ururido brings into play that your memories make you who you are. You know? She may look like Ururido, but she has Rumi's memories, just like all the other fakes. It's their memories that gave them their identity. Chapter 5 throws in another wrench by basically saying the you that exists now is the real one. That body double, because you still exist, that body double is a fake. You know, even though they look like you, even though they have your memories, you still exist in this moment, in this present moment. So that one is a fake. And it's just, it's giving, it's almost like what you said, Krabati. It's giving Jigsaw with philosophy. Giving holes in the logic. And it's meant to do that because this is the hump chapter. Okay, if we think about each chapter being one member of the numbers, well, there's 9 numbers, right? So that means there was going to be 9 chapters in this whole arc. Chapter 5, that's the very middle. That's the middle chapter. So all the chapters before this were building up this question, and I feel like all the chapters after this, we're going to put the pieces of the jigsaw together and sort of resolve the question and present it in the way that the story writers wanted to present it, because it is a very subjective question, right? But the creators, they clearly had something in mind, and those latter 4 chapters were going to take us in that direction, I feel. Right? But unfortunately, the game is going end of service and this is the last chapter, so we'll never see the conclusion of this story. Oops! That's the end! It's been fun, Tribe 9, but unfortunately, chapter 5 is where we end on a cliffhanger. Have a wonderful rest of your day and evening. Bye!